Welcome to the Helix webinar series. Today's session, we're going to be covering Helix On-Prem, and we're going to focus on Troubleshooting Toolkit, HITT, HCT, and AutoFix in action. And joining me today is Mark Walters, who's going to be presenting. He will do his formal introduction shortly. And in the panel, we've got a team that will start answering the questions, and I'm sure they'll introduce themselves towards the end. So before I hand over to Mark to do his introduction, just a couple of reminders. You will remain muted until towards the end, where we will have some live Q&A. We also have the Q&A section of Zoom at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions during the session, please put them in there, and then the team will answer those, and anything that's left towards the end, we will take to the live Q&A. We will also be running a poll halfway through, just asking you where you are on your journey. And if there are any follow-ups that you would like, the team will reach out. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark to get us started, because I know we've got a lot to cover. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Sam. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name's Mark Walters. Some of you may recognise me from previous webinars. I've been with BMC for it's almost 27 years now, and for the past few years, I've been a member of the SEAL team and now the SE team, and I've been working primarily with the Helix on-prem deployments, getting customers up and running and helping with issues there. Today, we're going to be having a look at some of the tools that are available that hopefully you're aware of, but sometimes people overlook, that can help you, particularly during the initial deployment stages, but also post-deployment for troubleshooting. And I'm going to be showing you some demos, hopefully, of how they work and just how easy they are to use. Right, so without further ado, let me get going. So this is the agenda. We're going to have a quick look at the tools we're talking about, a quick overview, and when and where you use them. Three in particular: the health check tool, HCT, which is primarily focused on the platform, the HITT tool for the Helix IS piece, and then the recently introduced AutoFix stage that's part of the Helix IS upgrade pipeline. And then we'll have a quick bit at the end on future plans before we get onto a Q&A. So obligatory Helix architecture slide. Hopefully this is familiar to most of you. Remember, we've got two sets of products that we deploy. There's the Helix platform common services, or ITOM, depending on whether you're just using those components for ITSM, for the service management, you only need the common services, but you can also add in things like Monitor, BHOM, BHCO, other BMC products also get added into that namespace for the deployment. And then once that's up and running, you install the Helix IS ITSM components, and the two integrate together. We have an external component, the deployment engine at the moment, where you will run the deployment manager script to install the platform, and where we also have the other tools such as Jenkins, Ansible, and the other components that are used for the ITSM installation. There are some changes coming in the next release in that area, and we'll mention those later. Quick comparison of what the different tools do. So the health check tool is primarily for the Helix platform. So that will be the first one that you use. It's run in the same place that you run the deployment manager script. It has different modes, checks lots of different things, produces some nice output, which will help you understand whether any issues that are found are things that you need to fix immediately, or whether they're just things that you need to be aware of. It was a community release originally. It has been added to the product from the 25.2 release onwards. So you download it from the EPD along with all the other products. The HITT, or IS triage tool, is primarily for the ITSM component. Again, runs on the same system as Jenkins. Has lots of different modes for different stages of the deployment, which we'll see in action. Checks for lots of common misconfiguration or missing components or settings. Again, produces output that you can look at and action if it makes sense to you, or produces a zip file that you can supply to BMC as part of a support case. It's currently available via this GitHub link at the bottom, That's just where I chose to put it because it was easy to update. There are plans for it to be adopted and productized, so it'll be available like HCT, but we're not there yet. And then there's the AutoFix pipeline. So this is a stage within the Helix full stack upgrade pipeline that you would run in Jenkins when you're going from one version of Helix service management to another. It runs before the upgrade stages, and it does a lot of checks to make sure that common misconfigurations or settings that are invalid are corrected before the upgrade starts. Again, the point being that by fixing them in advance, you reduce the chance of the upgrade failing and you having to sort of roll back. And that was added in the 25.401 release. This applies generally to all of them. They all produce outputs as they run, so you can see what they're up to. They produce sort of summary logs and detailed logs. Quite often there are suggested fixes available, so hopefully you can take steps to remedy any problems without having to come back to BMC to keep you progressing. The log levels that are produced, again, as I said, different levels. So you have severe warnings or critical errors, which means it's something you have to fix before you can progress the deployment, or you might get something that is just a warning, which is maybe something that's not expected. You can change later, or there might be a reason why it's set that way, but at least it flags it, you're aware of it. The reasons we want to run these, primarily, it makes it much more likely that you're going to be able to have a successful deployment, first time. By running these tools at the beginning of the process, it validates all of your inputs, makes sure that the system is ready for installation. You've got the right hardware configuration. You've got all the components that you need are in place. It prevents you having to either rerun pipelines or scripts, or in the worst cases, actually having to delete everything and start again because something was set incorrectly in the first place. It can also take, in some cases, several hours from the point that you start the deployment until an error actually makes itself known. So by spotting all this stuff up front, saves you time. There are output in a format that you can easily supply to BMC support, so you don't have to worry about trying to find different pipeline logs or troubleshooting logs. Everything's all packaged up and ready to go. And they generally don't require much, if any, additional resources or components before you can actually use them. So we'll start off by having a look at the health check tool. So again, it's from BMC. It's now part of the ITOM product, so it's available on the EPD. It's officially supported. We're updating it with each release to add new checks and to make sure it's all compatible. It has, as most of these tools do, as all of these tools do, really several different modes. So its main use is this pre-install mode. So for those of you that have already done these one or more of these deployments, you know that for the Helix platform, the common services or ITOM, you download and unpack an installer. You have to configure some text files with all of the parameters that you need for your environment. And then the deployment script picks that up, processes it, and uses it to actually do the deployment. So in its pre-install mode, it will go through and validate pretty much all of the settings that are in that file. It'll look for missing supporting components that you might have overlooked, make sure everything's the right version. So that's probably the one that people are most familiar with. The install and post-install modes, they can be used during and after deployment. So if you run into an issue during deployment, maybe a pod doesn't start or ends up in a crash state, the install mode will go and gather the pod logs, tell you how many errors are found, and again, put them in a format that you can easily either look at yourself or send to BMC support without having to remember all the obscure kubectl commands to actually get the pod logs and know which pod is which. The post-install one you can run at any time, and again, we'll just do a quick check of the pods for errors. So they give you a sort of a health check, if you like, to make sure that everything's up and running. It'll check that the RSSO system, for example, is functional, because that can sometimes cause issues. It's a core component of the system. So if that's not working, you'll have knock-on effects all over the place. And then coming in the 26.1 release, there's also this new cluster check option, which is a sort of a health check for the infrastructure. So it checks that the amount of resources that are committed and available on the nodes in your system, make sure that they're all up and running. And we'll have a look at that shortly in the demo. Quick list of the types of things that the health check tool checks. So it's things like the node configuration, kernel settings, mail, SMTP servers, time synchronization. You can read the list. But in addition to the values that you've populated in the config files, it looks more broadly at the environment and highlights any issues. And as I say, we're constantly adding to this and adapting it for new releases. Steps to install it. It's now a zip file, so you just download that from the EPD, copy it over to your deployment engine system and unzip it. There's a configuration file where there are two options that you need to set, the path to your Java installation, and also then the directory where you've unpacked the product installer and where the configuration files are found. Earlier versions, you had to go through a step where you sourced that file. Basically, you took the values that were set in that file and set them as environment values. From the 25.4 release onwards, that's now actually included in the script, so you don't need to worry about step 3 if you're on a recent release. And then you run it. Simply give the command along with the mode that you want to run on. Wait for it to run. It'll typically take a few minutes, depending on the size of your system and the speed of it. And then you'll have the output to review. If there are any critical errors, have a look at the logs, try and fix them, and then go around that loop. And that's common to the HITT script as well. Run it, check the results. If there are any problems, attempt to fix them. Once you've made those changes, rerun the script. There's no harm in running it again and again and again, and you sort of iterate until you get a clean bill of health, and you're good to go. Right, so I'm just going to switch screens a moment, and we will have a look at the tool in action. So this is my deployment engine system, and you can see I've downloaded the zip files, ready to go. If I CD into this one here, my sample end settings. So these are the values that you need to set. Your deployment manager value, the path to the Helix On-Prem deployment manager script, and also the path to your Java home. Obviously, they vary system to system, so you need to set those accordingly. I'm just going to change one of these a moment. So I've got this set up for the purposes of the webinar. And then it's a case of running the tool. We're going to run it in pre-install mode. And then it's just a verbose output. You can see what it's doing. Some of it will, for example, the sizing information is printed as it processes it. You'll see the different checks that are being run. Depending on how quick you are at reading the screen, if there are any errors, you might notice them as they go past. And you'll see it's checking the registry server, it's checking the certificates. At this point, it's deploying a test pod to make sure that the storage classes that you've specified are all valid. There's too many really here to go into in detail, but you will see after a few seconds. So it's now checking to make sure that all of the worker nodes that you have in the system, that they can do name resolution correctly. We've had issues with customers where their cluster DNS was set up in such a way that things weren't resolving. So this is checking that. To check the kernel settings for the number of open files, which is a requirement in the documentation, but again, some people overlook. And then I think it'll also go on and check the time sync between the different pods, because we can get issues on systems where one or more of the worker nodes is out of sync with the others. Certificate checks, they're important. We get a lot of issues around people using their own certificates, making sure you've got the right certificates in the chain that you're using. So important thing then here is at the bottom. So 43 checks attempted, 32 passed, 2 errors and 9 warnings. It's hard necessarily to pick the errors out of the screen output. You can go and have a look at the log. What I find quite helpful to do is just to actually just grep for the error message logs and have a quick summary. So we've got 2 errors in this case. One saying that a storage class is not found, and that's because it's a typo. I deliberately changed the name and took a character out. It should be NFS client. So that's showing an example where you might accidentally mistype a value into the config file. And then the other one here is certificate related. So I am using a custom signed certificate. I've put the custom ca-cert.pem in the correct directory, but I forgot to set the flag in the infra config file to tell the installer that I'm using it. The warnings, let's have a quick look. One thing that you can actually, I think you can actually ignore is you'll quite often see warnings about clusters, about the node specifications. The different sizings of ITOM that you deploy have each size has its own config file with a set of values for memory and CPU for the worker nodes. And I think those have got a little bit out of sync with the products. So generally the memory or CPU warnings can be they're less significant as long as you're happy that the nodes are appropriately spec'd as per our docs. Don't worry too much if the HCT complains. Again, same with the SMTP message at the bottom here. In my particular environment, the mail system is not accessible from the worker node, so I'm getting an error about not being able to connect to the mail server system. But that's expected in my environment. Let's have a look. Let me now switch back a moment. I'm going to change back to my, so I've just basically got 2 installations on here. One where I'd introduced a set of errors, and one I know is correct. So I'm going to now run in post-install mode. So this is what you could do after you've completed your installation, or run it, I say, at any time. If you're concerned you've got a performance issue, or you've got something that one of your pods is not running, you can run in post-install mode. And what it's going to do, it's going to work its way through the different pods, the different deployments. It's going to grep for errors, and it's going to save them out locally, so into a file that you can review or send to BMC. And as you can see, for example, it's checking for some out of memory errors, typical things like that. So you may or may not be able to action some of these, but it is quite a handy thing to have. And I say you can run it at any point. So we'll let that complete. It shouldn't take too long. Yes, I see a comment in the docs regarding the Java version. So this particular system, I think I'm using Java 21. It depends which version of the platform or the various Helix components you're installing. Obviously, for example, this is 25.4 here. That's been out for some time. I think it was QA'd and version 17 supported. In my case, I'm using 21, but it's compatible. So it's not a great deal, not a great error. Right, so let's have a look. So you can see to check that the pods are running. We can have a look at let's have a look at the error log. So you can see that it's perhaps a little bit daunting that there do appear to be so many errors. Don't worry about it, particularly immediately after deployment. Many errors are printed in the pod output simply because the system is configuring itself as it comes up. So for example, when a component's first deployed and some of the pods are started, they may try and read configuration information that hasn't yet been created by another pod. So there's some sequencing issues. But the important thing is that if you do need to raise a case with support, you can provide them with this log, and they will have a much better understanding of what to look for and what to pass. And then finally on the health check tool, I'll just show you, say the version 26.1 is introducing this new cluster check option. So again, this can be run at any time, but it's particularly useful, I guess, before you actually start a deployment. So what this has done has gone through, checked that all of the nodes, so I've got 3 control plane nodes and 6 workers, they're all ready and online. It's gone through and checked the amount of memory that's committed and in use on each of those worker nodes. So one of them, one of them's up at 80%, but none of them are in the red. So if, for example, you had a worker node that was out of action for some reason, or if it was running very low on memory, that would be highlighted here, and it's something that you can go and proactively make some changes or fix before you actually start your deployment. Okay, let me switch back to the presentation. Okay, and so the next thing is, so that's the health check tool for the Helix platform and common services. The HITT or Helix Innovation Suite triage tool is for the ITSM component. So this is it's a shell script. So it's available from go back. In fact, down at the bottom here is the URL bit.ly/get HITT is where you can go and grab this. It's also referenced in the BMC docs. Currently performs 150 or more checks. It sounds like a lot, but a lot of these are basically whenever we find a customer has an issue, or we run some internal training, and we run boot camps. Whenever one of our attendees finds an issue, if possible, we try and add a check to either HCT or Jenkins to make sure if it's seen again, we can capture it. One of the things that I've found with this Kubernetes stuff is that it can be quite time consuming to troubleshoot issues, particularly if you're not familiar with the system. You have to remember the kubectl command syntax. You have to have an understanding of the architecture and what's running in what pod. So by having as much as possible in these tools, it helps you, saves you having to worry about that, and gives you a quick consolidated single program to run to make all of those checks. So it runs on the deployment engine. You ideally, you have to have Jenkins set up and configured. There are some checks in HITT which will validate the Jenkins configuration for you. There are 4 main modes, 3 related to the product, 1 related to Jenkins, and this is sort of the order that you will generally run them in. So you'll run the host Helix platform, and that will go and do things like check that RSSO is working, make sure that all the other components are installed, validate your kubeconfig file, check that the realm that you need for ITSM has been created. You can then use the Jenkins mode to make sure that your Jenkins setup is complete. You've done your script approvals, you've got the right pipelines, the shared libraries, all of those things that you sometimes have issues with. HITT can check that. Go into Jenkins, fill in all the values in the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline, build it with just the Helix generate config option selected. That commits the values, saves them in a format that HITT can then process. You can then use the pre-IS mode, and that's where the majority of the checks are run. So that checks for missing values, inconsistent values, invalid values, particularly with respect to the Helix platform. All of those sorts of stuff. Once your deployment is complete, you can use the post-IS mode, and that the main difference between the pre and post-IS is that the pre-IS will go and get all the values it needs from either the platform or from Jenkins. In post-IS mode, it'll go and actually read them from the deployed system. So the passwords, the configuration settings, it'll go and look at the IS namespace and get the values from there. So it's looking at what you actually have rather than the pre-IS, which is what you're going to get it to do. Very simple to use. It's a single script that you can download. You can see the curl commands there, assuming you've got internet access. If not, it's just one file that you need to download. There is an optional DB jars file, which adds a few extra database checks. The reason that they're separate is that in many cases, the customer's database systems are isolated. The deployment engine itself won't necessarily have access to the IS database. It'll be firewalled off or in a separate network. So that's optional. If you do have that connectivity, you can use that. The first time you run it, it will prompt you for 6 bits of information. The namespace names, your Helix, your customer service and environment value, and Jenkins credentials if you're using them. You can go back and change those at any point. They're in a text file, and then it produces a bunch of different output, which we'll have a look at. Information about the pods that are running in the platform namespace, the values that have been entered in Jenkins, output from the console output of the pipelines, bundles it all up, puts it into a zip file, and again, you can then just send it off to us, and we can use that for troubleshooting if necessary. It has also a bunch of advanced features. If any of you have ever battled with the TCTL utility to try and do something with the Helix platform, there's a TCTL mode which you can run simple commands. So if you need to list the tenants or services or resume the tenant, for example, rather than having to download and configure TCTL, you can use HITT to do it. Bundle deployment logs. Again, just a quick way of getting them if you run into an issue during a pipeline run. The console output might be useful if you're used to working at the command line rather than having to keep jumping into Jenkins to go and have a look. And then the pipeline mode, the get and build mode, that's a new one which will be relevant for the upcoming 26.1 release. But so we're introducing a containerized deployment engine. So Jenkins itself will be running in a container. If you're doing a fresh deployment, that's how you'll set that up. That's great. If you're migrating from the Jenkins running on a deployment engine, this will give you a way to get the values from your last run of the pipeline or a run of the pipeline, save it in a file, and then use that file to actually populate the pipeline in the container version of Jenkins. So you can transfer all your values across without having to retype them. And then there are a bunch of other flags to do with debugging and troubleshooting, which if you ever raise a case with support, you may be asked to use. Finally, fix mode. So this was added a few months back, and this is a mode that HITT can use to fix a number of common problems. So if you have an issue with your SSO realm, maybe you've mistyped, there's something missing, and we'll see an example of that in a minute. It can recreate your realm. It can refresh the CA certs file that's in a secret. So if you've updated your certificates, you can get the database ID if you need to generate a license. And it also has a bunch of fixes for specific Jenkins issues. Those will become less relevant with the containerized version because that's all now done for you and you don't have to worry about it. But that might be useful if you're still using it running on a deployment engine. Right, let me show you that in action. Right, so let's get to the HITT directory. So I've already downloaded the tool, but if you wanted to do it, it's a single command. We just use curl to grab it, I say, assuming that you've got internet access. And then the first time that you run it, you can either use chmod to make it executable, or just as easily you can bash it, and it will prompt you for configuration. So in my case, I'm using the Helix PCS is my Helix Common Services namespace. I'm using the Webinar IS as my Helix IS namespace. My customer service value is Webinar, and my environment is ITSM. The Jenkins that I'm using has had authentication disabled. so I don't need to worry about it. You'll also find that if whenever you run HITT, if it has internet access, it will go and do a quick check to see if there's a new version available. If there is, it's always worth getting it. Just copy and paste and run that command, and you have the latest version. So let's start off with the post Helix platform mode. You'll notice when it's as the different modes are run that there's quite a lot of repetition. So it's sort of each one builds upon the next. So the post HP runs all the Helix platform checks. Pre-IS does the Helix platform checks plus the Jenkins pipeline values checks. And then post-IS will do the Helix platform and the deployed check. So you'll see the same output come up several times. Now, in this case, the system I've taken away or I've deleted the SSO realm that's needed before I can actually start the IS installation, just to show you what's happened. So you can see it's by combining the customer service and environment value, it's gone to try and find the realm. The realm's missing. It's telling you what realms are present, but this is where we can use the fix mode. So just do that, and it will go and create the realm for me. So for any of you that have, when you set this up manually and you have to go into SSO and add all the values, that's now done it. But again, because it can go and read the secrets and the config maps and the values from the Helix platform to get the information about that, and you've given it the customer service and the environment value, it can generate the realm details. So if we run post HP again, we'll see it gets a bit further this time, hopefully. It's printing out some information as it goes, what I've sort of left in that may or may not be useful. No errors, all good. If you want to, you can make it run a bit more verbosely. It gets a little bit noisy, but nevertheless, that might be useful. So if you're just trying to find information about about an environment, rather than having to remember all the kubectl commands and where everything's stored, you can just run HITT, and it'll tell you things like the tenant ID, the customer name, the portal URL, all that kind of thing. Does a few health checks, make sure that the FTS Elasticsearch is running, that kind of thing. So that's all good. So that tells me that my Helix platform is ready. I can now, let me use next one to check is the Jenkins. So this is checking my Jenkins configuration. So in this case, there shouldn't be any issues. It's making sure that all the plugins that I need are there, scripts have been approved, the nodes are configured, SSH configuration. Also has a bunch of in the fix modes. You can see here the Jenkins ones. If you were missing the pipeline libraries or the credentials are invalid, it can be used to update all of those rather than you having to actually go in and do it through Jenkins. So Jenkins is so the Helix platform's okay. Jenkins is okay. Let's run it in pre-IS mode. So I've run Jenkins. I've populated all my deployment values in the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline. It should now, once it's ready, it should go and read those and start chewing its way through them. The perils of doing a live demo. Come on. There we go. So again, as I said, you can see many of these checks are the same as the post HP. one of the nice things about HITT is that you don't have to provide a lot of config information. There's just those 6 bits of info: your namespace names, your customer service and environment, your Jenkins credentials, if you're using them, and then everything else it will try and or it will auto discover either by reading them from the system as it is at the moment, or it will go and fetch them from Jenkins. There are two types of messages we're interested in: the warnings and the errors. The warnings are things that don't look right, so they're maybe not the expected value. A typical one here, not one that's actually displayed, but one that we often see, is related to sizing. Because this is a tool primarily intended for Innovation Suite or ITSM, if your Helix platform was deployed with a one not wasn't deployed with one of the ITSM specific sizes, it would throw a warning. It might not be a problem. Maybe you're going to be installing Monitor, or maybe you've already installed BHCO, so you're using a small or a medium size for your Helix platform. That's valid. But if you're not doing that and you've picked one of those sizes, you'll end up using more resources than expected. So this is a warning that you maybe want to go and check that. The ITSM Insights, I've selected it in the pipeline, but it's not installed in the platform, so that's not going to work. The custom CA certs file was not found. I've actually put my CA certs file into the Git repository, so I don't have to keep remembering to add it. But again, that's a reminder that every time that you build the pipeline, you should attach your CA certs. And it's telling me that the Postgres database is not reachable. Again, in my environment, that's expected because it's running in the cluster and the deployment engine doesn't have access. The database IDs there is printed out, which you can use to go and get your license while the system deploys. And then in the errors point, the other one that's important is this one. So where I've entered the domain, the tenant domain value in the pipeline, I've missed the character off. It should have a 4 on the end there. So it doesn't match with what's actually installed in the platform. So by fixing that before you start, it prevents you running into a problem and having to do a redeploy later. Right, and again, as with the health check tool, the idea is that you would take steps to fix this. I can go in and rebuild the pipeline, correct the tenant value. Once it's rebuilt, I come back and run HITT again, make sure that the errors disappeared, and just go around that loop until all of the errors are addressed. Some warnings may remain if they're deliberate, but at least you're aware of them. So the next thing we'll have a quick look at is the post IS mode. So I'm just setting a flag there to use a different config file. So here it's one of the checks that it does is to make sure, or to look for any pods that are in an error state. So that might be relevant. In this case, it's just one of the background jobs, so I'm not too worried. But if, for example, if one of your platform pods wasn't running, or your Postgres pod, your RSSO pod wasn't running, then that you would use this in a situation where you were trying to troubleshoot an issue. So it's a sort of a health check on what's going on. So let's have a look at the warnings. The server's not licensed, fair enough. The database is not reachable, and I haven't assigned an external IP for the developer studio. Okay, none of those are showstoppers. What is a problem is that the CA certs is wrong. So this is a situation that we sometimes see where a customer has rerun the pipeline, the Jenkins pipeline, in service mode, for example, perhaps to change the database, the AR admin password, but they've forgotten to attach the CA certs, and it's ended up either the certificate has expired, and they've ended up with an invalid set of certificates in the environment, and then things like login won't work. You'll get 623 or 0 errors from RSSO. So this is telling you that the CA cert secret that contains those values or contains the certificates in the cluster is invalid. And that again is a case where we can use its fix mode. So there's a specific fix mode for CA certs. So you tell it you're running HITT in fix mode. It's a CA certs fix, and I'm giving it a file name of a certificates file. And what it will go and do, it'll go and validate that new certificates file, make sure it's acceptable and has everything that's needed in it. And then once it's done that, it says, yep, it's valid. Do you want to replace the secret? Yes, I do. Okay, that's done it. Restart of the any pod that's mounting that secret, and then you should be good to go. Quickly, I'll show you some of the other modes. So for example, the TCTL mode. So this works in the same way as the interops pipeline. It deploys a pod which has the TCTL utility already in it. We can get service, and say for any of you that have already sort of attempted to use the TCTL tool, hopefully you can see that's a little bit quicker than having to download and configure it. The pipeline mode, so that's getting me, just show you, it was a bit quick. So I'm running it in this K pipeline mode, so get last. So this is getting the last build of the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline, and these are all the values that we used. So these are all my pipeline values, and it's going to save those out in a file that I can then use to actually build. I can change the config to point to a different Jenkins, the containerized Jenkins, and I can use this file to actually push all of those values into that Jenkins. It won't start a build, or if it does start a build, the build will fail, but it means you've got everything transferred and there's no risk of you mistyping something or missing something out. And then you can rebuild that and just add the new values or change values as needed. And then the other one that might be useful, I say, is not that one, sorry, same one. There you go. So we're getting the output from the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline. All of this information is collected in a bunch of different log files that HITT generates on the fly. Everything's zipped up into that hitlogs.zip. So you can send that off to BMC, whenever you open a support case, run this tool, send that off to us, and that will hopefully save you a lot of time. Switch back to final tool, although I say it's not really a tool, but it's a feature now, is this upgrade, AutoFix upgrade stage. So when you come to do an upgrade of an installed Helix ITSM system, you run the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline with the new values and the full stack upgrade option selected, and that runs the full stack upgrade pipeline, and that makes the database changes, starts a new version of the server, the platform upgrade pod, imports the new workflow and forms, and then updates all the deployments to the new version before everything sort of restarts. If one of those stages runs into a problem, it can be a bit of a nuisance, because depending on where you are in the process, you may end up having to roll back and restore the database and run a bunch of Helm commands to reset the charts and get everything working again before you can attempt the upgrade, before you can reattempt the upgrade. So what this AutoFix stage does, it's been added to the full stack upgrade pipeline. It runs before anything else, and it goes in and it reads values from the CCS, from the database, and looks for known issues. So issues that we've come across from other customers in our SaaS environments, things that we know cause problems, but not only does it look for them, it actively goes and fixes them. So it will make changes to the system to bypass or to avoid upgrade problems. If it finds something it can't fix, the pipeline will abort. You can go and have a look at a log. You can talk to BMC, or you can fix the problem yourself if you can, before you can rerun the pipeline. So by doing this up front, it prevents you getting so far into the process that you have to back out and roll back things to try and fix them. When it's run, it creates a record in the AR system upgrade tracker form. This checker utility tool record is the one you're looking for, the component name checker utility tool, and in there you'll see there's an attachment pool within an attachment. Download that file, rename it to give it a .gz extension. That's a security thing. So quite often we have the attachment validation plugin will maybe block compressed attachments, certain extensions. So download the attachment, rename it, decompress it, and in there you will find an Excel sheet, which I'll show you in a second, which summarizes all the checks that have been run. Again, you can provide that to BMC. We can work with you to get it fixed, and you can then rerun the upgrade pipeline and hopefully be more successful. So this is the output that's in that report. So there's a summary of what's being run, the status column. So you can see that a number of these checks failed, gives you a bit of detail about why. The right hand, the colored column on the right, those that are green, those are ones that the AutoFix pipeline has actually done. You know, it identified a problem, it knew about it, it found it had the fix, it made the change. You don't know, you don't have to do anything else about it. The one that's a problem here is the one with two reds. So this was run on a system where I didn't have, I'd stopped it partway through an installation. So I'd done a deployment, but I hadn't completed the deployment of the non-platform and smart apps pipelines. So I'm missing some of the components. So now when I've run the upgrade check, it's gone to check some DWP values. DWP is not running, so it's got an error and the pipeline has aborted. So maybe my DWP pods had been scaled down for some reason. Sometimes customers do that. They do a deployment, decide they're not using a service, so they scale it down, but they forget to scale it up before they attempt an upgrade, and it would cause a failure. But the AutoFix pipeline or the AutoFix stage here has handled that by stopping the upgrade, giving you the reason, and letting you go and do something about it before you attempt the upgrade again. Quick mention of some of the things that are coming. So as I said, we are constantly adding new features. If you're used to running the HITT script particularly, you'll be every time you run it, probably you'll find there's a new version, because wherever we find a new problem, we add it. There are plans to combine HCT and HITT into a single tool, so you have less to worry about and only one thing to download. And as I said, in 26101, which is due a few weeks, hopefully, maybe sooner, we will have a containerized version of the deployment engine. HITT is already updated to work with that, but we'll continue to add support and features as we go along. Some references, the link to get the HITT tool, the documentation. There's a containerization group. So particularly if you're new to this, if you're just getting started with Helix on-prem, go to the BMC community, find the BMC Helix containerization group. You have to request membership, but it's not restricted. So just click the button to say, please, may I join? And one of us will do that, and then you'll have access to previous customers' issues, feedback, give you a place to go and ask questions as well. Sam?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for all your presenting today. So just to let everyone know that's on this call, again, we will be sharing out these slides, sharing out the recording and everything that's been with you today, plus the questions and answers that we've been getting in. This is our new links that we've got for our channels in YouTube. We were finding there was quite a lot of content out there and it was old content. So we've actually restructured YouTube. So once this recording is available, it will actually be on the Helix Events channel. And if any of you are working very closely with support, there is also a channel called BMC Helix Enablement, and that's where you will find the how-to videos, which are connected to the knowledge articles, and they are ones that I also upload. So hopefully you should be able to start getting information on content as well. So it was just really to let you know we've updated it. It's now BMC Helix, and we're putting them in playlists so they're easier for you to find. Okay, I think that's the main thing, Mark, that I wanted to just mention. And then obviously, let's get into Q&A. I'm very impressed with you. We've got 10 minutes left because I know you can get very carried away.
Well, thank you everybody for your attention. And now, if you have any questions, please
we do.
Raise your
So
hand.
what I'm going to do, I can see Aaron's asked a few questions, and hopefully, Aaron, you're brave enough to come off of mute and talk to us live. Otherwise, I can read your questions. Can you hear us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello.
Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever whatever time.
Wherever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Hello.
asked questions during the presentation, but a lot of them were answered in the channel there. I guess the only thing that's outstanding, I have a few discrepancies around the documentation. I saw that during your demonstration you had used Java 21, which is great. I previously used Java 17 with the HCT tool and had success, but the documentation really recommends Java 11, which has been out of support for quite some time. It'd just be nice to see that the documentation is updated. That's fine, not a big deal. One of the maybe the outstanding questions, and it probably isn't relevant, but I asked it anyway, is the when you're running the is it the HITT
HIT,
tool?
yes, yeah.
Uh, and you're checking Jenkins and you're running
hmm
fix. I assume you're doing this on a deployment engine, but when we get to containerized version, like, I don't assume that that's going to apply or matter. I don't know what all the checks it is they're doing because
So,
never used it,
yeah,
but
so it's interesting. So the HIT has, for its primary modes, there are those that are related to the product. So there's the post HP, pre IS, post IS checks, but it also has these Jenkins configuration checks, and they were added in response to problems that we were seeing people having. Once you've actually got at the moment, when you've got Jenkins installed, there are a set of post deployment steps that you need to go through to configure Jenkins. You need to add some
hmm.
credentials, you need to configure some shared libraries, and it was very easy for people to make mistakes doing that. So the Jenkins mode checks make sure that they're all okay, and there are some fixed modes available as well. Those will be much less relevant with the containerized deployment engine because that is ready to go out of the box. All of that stuff's already done for you, so that's a great step forward. The product modes, pre-IS, post-IS, all of those are still applicable. So you will see you will still need a Linux system somewhere that can talk to Jenkins to be able to do this. That's going to be one of the interesting things we'll have to see as people start using this is how they configure it. So you still need a Linux system to deploy to run the deployment manager script to install the common services, and you will use probably the same system to run HIT. And HIT will need it'll need a kube config file so it can talk to the cluster. It'll need kubectl. So it's the Jenkins bit itself that's moving into a container.
Right. So the Jenkins check that HIT runs, it's not as relevant for the containerized version because it's pre-set up out of the box with an image. Is there a PVC underneath that? I'm guessing there has to be.
There will be, yes. So
Okay.
let me actually, if you have a moment, so
Is
I'm
it a
going to
stateful set or a deployment? Do you know at this point?
I'll show you what it is.
Okay.
If I can remember what it's called. BMCDE, was it? Yes, so this is so I put it in a separate namespace. So this is the containerized deployment engine that's coming. You can see there are three pods. Actually, there are three pods actually running. There are several pods that have run during the deployment. So we've got a Jenkins master, which is the Jenkins interface that you're used to using. There's a Jenkins agent, which is a headless pod that actually does a lot of the work. And then there's this, I'm not sure how you pronounced it, Gittia, which is a Git pod where all the Git repo files are stored. Both the Git pod and the Jenkins master, I believe, have PVCs associated with them to store the configuration, the Jenkins job history, the actual Git repos behind the scenes. And then these other pods are used, as the name suggests, for bootstrapping, for the configuration, and for actually loading the Git repositories.
And outside of deployment activities and upgrades, I suppose you just recommend people scale them to
You can
zero.
scale those down, absolutely. They're not just as today, once you've actually done the deployment, you can shut down the deployment engine. We strongly recommend you hold on to it because you'll need it again when you come to do an upgrade, or if you need to make a service mode change, if you need to update a password or something like that, you'll need access to that Jenkins. And of course, it's got the build history, so all of your previously written
Hmm.
values are available. But you absolutely can scale these down outside of deployment and maintenance windows.
It'll have to be upgraded occasionally as well and updated, I imagine.
So when I think the way it will work, and I say this is a slightly conjecture, maybe somebody can jump in, but I think what will happen is you can, so your plugins, for example, Jenkins plugins, you can update in real time because they're stored on the PVC. If we want to update the version of Jenkins, I think you'll need a new container from us. I'm not sure whether it will.
Yes, we will do that with every release, and we will have a next month's webinar about the 26.1 release updates, including an extended session about this containerized Jenkins. So let's keep up and leave some for next time.
Leave some for next week. Yep, fair enough.
Yeah, well, I want to occupy all the time here, but one last thing in consideration, deployments with PVCs are a little bit challenging. You can't restart them. You have to scale them down and back up, or the PVC won't attach on the incoming restarted pod. So I don't know if that can be changed to a stateful set in the future if it matters. It's also, if it's a stateful set, has a static name, which can be referenced a little easier through scripting than discovering what the name is. It's dynamic and changing all the time. And if you do have to upgrade Jenkins and you're going to a new container image, you have to deploy it with a new PVC, and you will lose all your history.
I think it's a
consideration for the client base.
It'll be covered in more detail. It is a stateful set, and it's a Helm chart as well, so it's upgradable directly using that, I believe. But there'll be more detail, as Raquel says, in the next webinar session, where specifically we'll be looking at these features.
Thanks.
Thank you. Just a quick one. I can see that we've got a question still from Aidan. I just want to come to his question, and then Sandeep, I can see you've raised your hand as well. So Aidan, can you hear us? Did you want to come off mute?
So is this the question that was in the chat?
Yeah, it's still in there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So HITT checks so that the ITSM is dependent on one of the OpenSearch stroke Elasticsearch. Sorry, it is OpenSearch, but we still tend to call it Elasticsearch sometimes. One of the OpenSearch instances in the Helix platform that's used for the full text search indexes. HITT does check the health of that instance. It goes and checks the cluster health of the OpenSearch instance and will report if there are any problems. You can't. We don't support you using your own Elasticsearch or your own OpenSearch for this. You can't scale it down because you have to be using the ones that BMC provide at the moment. So I hope that answers that.
Okay. And then Sandeep, can you hear us?
Yes, Samantha.
Hello.
Hi, Mark. Hello. Hi, Mark. This is regarding the Jenkins plugins, which you are referring. We used to have a Jenkins in the Linux platform, and we are able to update the plugins separately if there is a vulnerability being identified. Only the plugins, right? We don't need to even upgrade the entire Jenkins. Only the plugins of the Jenkins can be upgraded. But once we move to this containerization, how that is handled, because the vulnerable plugins, I don't think we will be having a solution directly on the PVC, right? We have to upgrade the entire Jenkins in this case.
You can upgrade the plugins in on the fly because they are stored as part of the Jenkins home directories where all the Jenkins configuration is stored on the PVC. So yes, you absolutely can update the plugins.
But the latest version of the plugin won't be available in the PVC, right?
But if you've got internet access, you can use Jenkins built-in upgrade route.
That is not that. That's a concept what we did current Linux-based Jenkins version. Even if one particular
you should still be able to copy the HPI files, and then you'll have to transfer them into the pod and put them in the right place. So there will be a way to do it, yes, and we'll have to maybe put a KA together that explains how you do it.
Exactly, because our security team identifies the vulnerability on the plugins within the Jenkins. So that's why this is keep on coming to us. So it's better when we move on. There is a knowledge article that explains how to upgrade without internet.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. That's a good one. Okay, we've got another question come in, Mark, and then I know we've got to close. We're a couple of minutes over. So question to the Jenkins container platform, where will the Git files be stored?
They are in a Git server, so that's that Gitia server. So there's a separate pod where effectively a Git instance where they're all stored.
I don't know if you have time or
Mm.
whether you'd like to see a little, or they'd like to see a little preview of the Helix logging solution that I have. All right, let me see here.
Do you want the slide,
Okay.
John, or are you going to demo?
Yeah, could you hang on to that slide and maybe present it from your side? Well, I'll do a quick demo first. All right, so it's what you've just seen focuses obviously on install time diagnostics and really structured triage. So what I'm going to show you next is what troubleshooting could look like on a system running in production. So obviously in most environments, troubleshooting, starts in the same way. You open dashboards, you search through log files, and then you try to piece everything together manually. So what I'm experimenting here with and exploring it's a completely different approach. So this is really where the system, the way I've set it up and designed it, so that it retrieves only the relevant evidence from, in this case, BMC Helix logging, which is out of the box, or it's an optional component that you can install with On-Prem. And it retrieves that information, and then it uses what kind of makes it a little special here is that it uses AI reasoning to actually explain what's happening under the hood. So instead of searching the telemetry, you're just asking a conversational question. So you can see here, for example, I've asked it if there's any pretty generic, right? Any errors, remedy errors, or exceptions in January 26. And then what happens really in the background is it's actually, and I'll show you the architecture in a minute. Mark has a slide on the deck. But what's happening in the background is actually triggering a Innovation Studio Web API, and that Web API is going to hit a custom Python web application. So it's a pod that's running in Kubernetes. And from there, what I've done is I have coded the Python application to retrieve whatever it is I'm looking for, in the search here. But what's handy here, what's useful is that it's very flexible, and I can control. So that means I can control the amount of data that's coming back. I can put in some guardrails. I can make sure that user doesn't do anything like reckless and take down system with too much data. And so it really gives you a lot of, as I said, like flexibility in terms of refining that information. So you can see the information that it's bringing back. It's automatically searching for error strings. Is telling me that there's an authentication problem, view definitions missing, problem with the database, and this is all for the month of January 26. So I can refine it, for any, further for any particular day if I want. And then if I wanted to drill into any one of those errors, then I can ask it as well. And so you can see as a follow-on question, I've asked it about the authentication error that it found and whether it had reoccurred again today. And you can see that it's come back, and it's already told me in natural language that it found multiple occurrences where it picked out an authentication problem, and it's after telling me where exactly it found those errors and which log files, let's say. And then it gives me a little summary, but it's, this is just an example. You could like fine tune it even further. Even at the agent level, you could educate it a little more, and influence behavior. But really, I suppose it's trial and error. You just need to play around with it. So here's another example of just searching for a random database problem. I've kept the question very loose and generic, and it's already understood that it needs to go off and find anything related to DB in this case, obviously, and it's picked out problems related to Grafana. It's also telling me that there was some disconnections, but in this case, you can see that it's telling me, look, don't worry about these connection problems. They're only normal connection and disconnection activities. And you can see down here, and this is an example of how I put in a little guardrail. So you can put in guardrails at the Python level, the code level, and at the agent level, just as a sort of as a precaution. And so the tool budget means that it's not going to call any other tools. So because in this case, I've actually associated this particular agent with a number of other tools. That's just a good example of that. And if I want to summarize the whole thing for a period of time, let's say, in this case, I'm asking it for the entire week. So you can see it's come back with a 7-day log evidence triage summary. And it's telling me the number of occurrences, the types of remedy errors, and so on, the bundle errors, and then again, and once again, it's given me a little summary of what it's found at the bottom here. So I think it's it's as powerful as your code to an extent. So if Mark, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to stop sharing now. Could you switch back?
Yeah.
To the architecture, please. Okay. So what you've seen obviously isn't just magic. There's a deliberate idea and architecture behind it, and so really, what this is showing is how we're changing the starting point of an investigation. So instead of, as I said earlier, jumping into log files, we're just asking it, and the service collaborator in simple, plain language, a question, and then the AI understands that intent behind the question. Then it decides at that point how to investigate. So once that happens, we don't actually send the raw logs obviously to the model, because that in itself would be a huge problem in terms of token usage. So all we're doing is we're calling a small evidence service through Innovation Studio, and that service, this is my Python service, queries here Helix logging, and that's really what pulls back the relevant information and reduces all of that stuff into more structured evidence. And that's what we get back into Helix GPT, which does the reasoning over it. And then obviously, it can explain what's happening and then highlight the patterns and then suggest, what next steps you might have to take to rectify the situation. So the key shift here is that the AI here in this case, it isn't reading the log noise. It's reasoning over all of that curated evidence. And ultimately, it's what makes the investigations faster and hopefully easier to explain. So there's a little link about how I set this all up on the slide there that you can see in front of you. And if any questions, just let us know, and we'll do our best to come back to you and help you.